So with development and interaction, we basically just have a bunch of terms that you need to know and how to apply them. So here we have 4 questions that we'll go over throughout the video, and we'll have these same questions show up at the end and see if you can answer them. So the controlling idea or central insight in a piece of fiction is the blank. Okay, so we would like to know what that is. Plot is plot. Rising action versus falling action. Can we recognize that in fiction? And figurative language. Can we have an example of that? Okay, so we essentially have, I think, 8 terms here, and it's just being able to be familiar with them. So we'll go over each. So we start off with plot, theme, and setting. So plot refers to the sequence of events inside a story, which affects other events through the principle of cause and effect. Okay, so that's really what you're looking for there, is cause and effect. Theme is a piece of fiction. In a piece of fiction, is its controlling idea or the central insight? That was one of our questions, right? The very first bullet point there, the controlling idea or central insight in a piece of fiction is the blank. And probably shouldn't have the word the, but it's theme, is the theme. I guess that's fine. It is the author's underlying meaning or main idea, this we're still talking about theme, that he or she is trying to convey. Themes are universal and timeless. Theme is defined as a main idea or an underlying meaning of a literary work that may be stated directly or indirectly. Love could be a theme, but the prince falling in love with a peasant girl is much more part of the plot than theme. So that's a little example there of plot versus theme. And then with setting, setting is usually thought of as time and place, right? And so that's really your main thought that we want to have. If we see time and place, then we're thinking that's setting. But the description of that place could still count as setting. Therefore, something like weather conditions would constitute being part of setting. Mood and atmosphere also are part of setting. What feeling is created at the beginning of the story? Is it bright and cheerful or dark and frightening? Things like that. Those all relate to setting. Okay, 3 more. So we have rising and falling action. And if you remember, that was one of our questions. Okay, the second one there is plot. What is the difference? The third bullet point. What is the difference between rising and falling action? All right, so let's see if we can learn a little bit about these. Rising action is where the events in the story become complicated and the conflict in the story is revealed. So that would be events between the introduction and the climax. Falling action is when the events and complications begin to resolve themselves. It makes sense if you just kind of like think of the words, right? Rising action, right, is these events are starting to be revealed, right? The complications are starting to be revealed. Falling action, the things have been revealed, and the resolution is starting to show up. Okay, figurative language. Figurative language often uses the words like or as to paint a mental picture in the reader's mind. Whenever you describe something by comparing it with something else, you're using figurative language. So it would be an example of that, like as fast as the wind, is comparing how fast someone rode their bike, for example. It makes you think they must have been going pretty fast, right? So that's an example of figurative language. And then the last 2, making sure you're just familiar with fiction compared to nonfiction. Fiction is a form of literature that describes imaginary events and people. And then finally, knowing explicit versus implicit. If the text is explicit, then the cause and effect would be directly stated, where implicit comes from implied, right? So you'd have to be able to read in between the lines to understand something that's implicit. Okay, that gets us back to our questions, right? So we've answered these 4 throughout this video. And so a great thing to do right now, pause the video, see if you can answer these, right? And make sure you're familiar with each of the 8 terms that we went over, because they will definitely show up in some form or another on the exam.